Story 1. I'll begin by saying I'm personally more on the side of a skeptic frame of mind with any paranormal experience, but enough things have happened in the last year to make me at least question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought in June of 2017, which was built in the 1920s. First, in October of 2017, I was laying her down for bed in the dark with only moonlight lighting in the bedroom. She pointed across the room and asked, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to, but saw nothing, so I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that he was right there and gestured toward the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing, in case I could piece together some recent episode of pretend play or a toy she commonly talked about. She said he was hiding. I asked if he was scared. She said no, he's hiding. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not scared. What made it strange was that she was 2 at the time and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling at that point. And as I mentioned, no toys were in sight. From there, we had just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. This is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episodes or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy is pulling a prank. Next, in January or February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle-up night-night talk when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed. Just me and you, and him and her." My skeptic mind would argue that him could easily have been her little brother, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him, and he wasn't included in any of her talk that we were just having. What really was strange was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she wasn't in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us, and none were in the near vicinity of her bed that could have been what she was talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into conversation, Mr. Longneck. Short backstory is, my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We can't really explain it other than kids do weird stuff sometimes, and it started before we moved into this house. Well, anyway, she was getting put down for a nap and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt, and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck, Mr. Longneck." I had never heard her use this name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix show she watches, so I asked who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off and was asleep 10 minutes later. This was when I started getting creeped out a bit by her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our home in 2009, which we knew about and in which no one was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff in the walls and included it with some pictures of the fire and a couple newspaper clippings. Among the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogs from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten names inside. I presume these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names inside as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that if there is something paranormal going on, maybe these objects are keeping some energy here or something. In about October of 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, my daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said, "Where?" She pointed to the empty front seat and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home, as he had just recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalks for her to point at either. Now, there have been minor other events that have happened, but these were the biggest ones to describe in detail. While we have, to an extent, encouraged her to be comfortable talking about it, I never pushed it in order to avoid leading the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would offer just to appease the conversation. One day, though, and a few times after, I just decided to ask her about it. And this is a brief detail of what she had said in roughly the past month. I asked her, "Can you tell me about that guy?" She says, "What guy?" I said, "You don't remember that guy?" She says, "No." And I said, "Well, what about Mr. Longneck?" She says, "Oh, yeah." And her face lit up. And then there was various other questions that led to, Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears monster clothes and a hat. He is nice, but also scary. He says trick or treat, but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. He says he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has, but was generally in the afternoon. He knocks on our big door, the patio door, and walks through the kitchen. These were her exact words, and while she was telling me this, was pointing a path from the door to one of our living room windows. I asked what he says or does, and among a few things, she mentioned he played in the kitchen with her with the spinny cow toy. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull spring farm toys. She never plays with it, I rarely see it, and have never seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest for sure. I also asked if he ever brought a friend to see if I could follow up on the her that she had mentioned earlier. He brings a friend. She's a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She is never scared of these talks, although she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about his neck and why it is long. We have saged the house quite a while ago and plan to do it again. I think we will probably also get rid of the old items from the walls after we find out more about them. Story 2. I was there as a hiring perk and to look after the place for my boss, who lived out of state, who owned the home, one of those win-win situations. The first couple of months were fine, but when winter came, I started hearing things coming from the second floor. I lived pretty much exclusively on the first floor. It started with little bumps and bangs coming from above where I had my computer set up, and progressed to distinct footsteps coming and going across the second floor. I had been up to the second floor to check up on it from time to time, and I knew that there were unfinished areas up there. One place always stuck out, an unfinished room that was a sort of walk-in closet for one of the upstairs bedrooms. It was attached to the garage attic, completely unlit. It was open when I went up to investigate the noises. I shut the door and locked it. 2 nights later, more noises. Footsteps leading from the unfinished room to the bathroom. Then nothing. The worst part, the door. The door that led to the unfinished room would not stay closed or locked. I tried everything. Eventually, I pushed the bed up against the door to keep it from opening. That seemed to work. A few months went by without the door coming open, but I would find it unlocked all the time. As time passed, I would hear noises all over the house, mostly footsteps, but the occasional thump with no explanation. I cannot explain how horrifying it is to hear little taps up and down the hall from the other side of a bathroom door during your morning shower. I eventually moved out, but another employee moved in to take my place. His stay there only lasted about a month. The story he told me is that he was shaving one morning before work and he heard a slam like someone dropped a heavy stack of books right outside his bedroom door, then heavy footsteps like someone running down the hall. He couldn't stay there anymore, and no one in the company will live in that house. Story 3. I lived in an old haunted house in college. Things got so weird that everyone moved out except for me and one roommate. One time, I woke up at 3 a.m. because my roommate's door kept opening and slamming shut. From bed, I yelled for him to stop, only to realize I was the only one home that weekend. As soon as I yelled, the slamming stopped. But the hippie beads I had hanging outside my closed door began to sway perfectly, yet violently, against the door frame for a half hour while I debated if I should pop out my air condition unit and jump out of the window. I laid in the fetal position in bed until it stopped. Another time, I woke up at 3 a.m., alone again, hearing the Nintendo in the back porch playing loudly. I figured a drunk kid came in and started playing. I grabbed a bat and walked towards the back of the house as the music got louder and louder. As soon as I opened the door, it was completely quiet. Mind you, it was loud enough to wake me up. Another time, I had friends over and told them the house was haunted. No one believed me, so I asked the ghost to do something to prove it was there. As soon as I asked, all the lights in the house began flickering for about a minute straight. This was the middle of the day. Everyone witnessed it. Almost everyone who stayed at my house had sleep paralysis at least once in the house. Every time something spooky happened, the house would smell like old lady flowery strong perfume. This house had a door built into the flooring that led to the basement. We always had a rug covering it up so no one knew it was there. Things would constantly go missing in the house and turn up in the basement. This house had a coal chute from when it was heated by coal back in the day. Missing stuff would always be placed on the chute for us to come and get. Another one is my roommate had some issues. Once while playing video games late at night, he saw mist kind of hovering from the kitchen, then moved into the bathroom. The bathroom had a trap door that led to the attic. That's where we figured the old lady ghosts used to like to hang out. Another time, my roommate was up late. He went to go lock the doors and turn off the lights. When he turned his back on the room and walked to the door, someone breathed into his ear. He thought it was me. I was sleeping. He turned around, pretty much crapped himself, and ran to his room. He was too afraid to come out and turn off lights and the TV. You would hear loud thumps in the attic at all hours. For peace of mind, we told ourselves squirrels must have gotten in there. Voices would wake us up in the middle of the night. I spent many mornings on the front porch waiting for the sun to come up before I went back in the house. Coincidentally, I had a friend years later that rented from the same landlord, the same town, but a different house, where he and all of his roommates moved out because that house was also haunted. I didn't think it was too weird until he was telling me that when all of the weird stuff happened, it was accompanied by old lady flowery stinky perfume. Also, a lot of people had sleep paralysis in that house as well. Story 4. My husband and I own a martial arts school, and the building that it's in, which we also own, is about 130 years old, and it's next to a church. And I never, and still don't really, there has to be another explanation, believed in the paranormal, but the things that happened in it didn't just happen to me. It was decrepit, which was why it was so cheap to purchase, and we basically did all the work ourselves, old, creaky, and drafty. So here's a bunch of things that happened. When we would be working with like drills and electric saws, I'd hear the tinkling of a music box, and I'd stop everyone to ask if they hear it too. No one else did, so I assumed it must have been some music from the church coming through. My husband would often hear a woman's voice calling his name from the bottom of the stairs. It's 2 floors, a basement, and a loft. And thinking it was me back from work, would always ask it to come up. Turns out the building was empty. Happened 4 or 5 times. One night, there's a small apartment on the 2nd floor connected to a large hall. We woke up hearing what sounded like a broom sweeping across the wooden floors in the large hall. My husband got up to go check, but once he would walk in there, the sweeping sound would stop. It happened 3 more times that night. We chalked it up to mice or squirrels. We did find mummified squirrels in the attic once. We had a barbecue in the backyard, and I needed to go get more utensils. There's a metal stairwell from the backyard up to the 2nd floor, and then there's the main entrance staircase opposite to that. I came up the main entrance and heard footsteps pacing back and forth across the far end of the hall, and thought my husband came up from the metal stairwell to get utensils with me. It was dark and I couldn't see anything. I called out for him and the pacing stopped. No response. And then the pacing footsteps continued. Annoyed, I thought he was messing with me, so I flipped on the lights, and all of the utensils from the shelf where I heard the pacing crashed down on the floor, like I spooked something. But there wasn't anything, not even a rat like I thought there might be. One Saturday morning, my husband was on his computer in another room. I'm in the apartment playing with a Tamagotchi app on my iPad when I heard the stereo sitting in front of me click on, and a girl's voice started talking from it. I thought he controlled the stereo from his computer, so I ignored it because he often puts on music to work out before class started. He teaches the morning class. I do remember thinking, what kind of weird indie music is he listening to anyway? Because the voice just said, "Hi, my name is," and I thought I heard Katie, but I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't paying attention. I have never known a Katie in my life. Then it said, I don't know, something years old. I'm from, and etc. I didn't catch the specifics because I wasn't really listening, but That went on for about 2 or 3 minutes until it suddenly went, "Something's hurting me." And when I caught that, I looked up and squinted at the stereo like, "What?" "Something's killing me. Something's killing me." At this point, the hair is standing on the back of my neck, and I'm getting up from the couch to take a closer look. "Please, someone tell my parents, tell the teachers, tell the corrections officer." At the word corrections officer, I just bolt into the other room and start yelling at my husband and cursing him out because I was certain he was playing a trick on me. Told him, "We don't play jokes about dead people." And he's, of course, looking at me like, "What the?" When he finally calms me down long enough to get what I heard out of me and what I was accusing him of, he told me it was impossible and led me to the stereo. "It's not plugged in." I thought maybe the stereo picked up the signals from an e-book or something. So after that last fiasco, I went to ask our live-in student who lived with his girlfriend in the basement apartment of the building if anything weird happened. They shot each other an alarmed look and told me this. His girlfriend was sleeping one night when he was working overnight, and she heard footsteps come down the stairs and their door open and then close. All of a sudden, a bright flashlight shines in her face, and she can just make out the silhouette of who she thought was her boyfriend because he's tall, and she can see the dirty jeans he's wearing. She's annoyed thinking he's messing with her, so she's swatting at him and telling him to stop. Finally, she gets so pissed, she rolls over, turns on her lamp, and there's no one there. They sometimes hear footsteps on the first floor when there's no one in the building. They had a pet mouse at the time, and whenever that happened, it would start doing backflips in its tank. However, when class is going on and there are people in the building, the mouse didn't care and just went about its mousy business. They were play wrestling one day when suddenly their African gray parrot ruffled its feathers and in a really alarmed voice asked, "Who's there? Who's there?" They thought it was funny at first, so our student looked at the bird and pointed to the door and said, "You mean over here?" and ran towards the door to open it. As he did that, all the books that were lining the shelf on the way to the door fell over in front of him, and the lights started flickering. The bird and the mouse both got spooked and were throwing themselves against their cages. Our second live-in student after the first one had gotten married to his girlfriend, and they got their own home and had a baby. Several times could just not find his phone when he woke up in the morning when he had placed it next to his bed the night before. He would search his room high and low and then find it perfectly placed right outside his locked bedroom door on the floor. I thought he might have been sleepwalking, but his girlfriend says she'd realize if he did that since she's a very light sleeper. So, don't know what that's about. Nothing notable has happened since then, but we have also not had anyone stay there overnight in years. Story 5. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old, I absolutely refused to go upstairs. The upstairs had 2 large closets or attics. They ran from one side of the upstairs all the way to the other side on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was maybe 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl sitting there in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost, they aren't scared, just interested. Nope, I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair, a nice dress, and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend, and got out of the closet. Told him what I saw in there. He said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would get up there, I would see the doors swing open, as if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere. Suddenly, my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents out of the attic, and we would find some of my toys in there. I remember being 8 years old. My parents are asleep still in the morning, and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog, usually up for anything, refused to go off the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me with all the weird things that happened in that house. I would get blamed for things that happened all over the house, leaving lights on, toys all over, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyway, we moved out of there when I was 10. Not a week passes before the new owners calls us up and ask if the house is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs. She says that she has been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They kept in contact with us. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl sitting on their daughter's lap. They looked up on the computer the past owners of the house, found an old dressmaker that lived there, and yep, a picture of the little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there were absolutely torn apart by the events. They got divorced. The dad stayed living in the house and ended up taking his own life in that house.